I took a long, hard look at the Ronin-S one-hand stabilizer. Does it live up to the hype? This is Cinema 5D, I'm Nino Leitner, and this is a review of the Ronin-S gimbal stabilizer. Gimbals have really invaded every aspect of filmmaking over the past few years. I've been using them on my own shoots for a very long time. In fact, I was one of the first customers of the Freefly Movi M10 when it first came out. That was the first gimbal that was made for handheld use, and Freefly kind of, they made this category. It didn't exist before. I was really happy at the time that I could put my C300 on it, but I really dreaded the total weight of it with all the stuff on it and the heavy camera. So I switched to the Movi M5 when it came out, and to this very day it is still my favorite gimbal. I mostly use it in upside down mode with the camera in front of my face and the handles down below, which is really the most ergonomic and most comfortable position that I've come across for using a gimbal so far. But of course, DJI has been making two-handed gimbals for a long time now as well. With the original Ronin, the Ronin-M and now the Ronin-2, there are already 3 solutions on the market from DJI which have 2 handles. They're really heavy compared to the Freefly Movi M10 and M5, both of which are made of carbon fiber. And because I love my dual-handle gimbal setup so much, I never understood why you actually would want to use a one-hand gimbal. I really think there isn't really a one-hand gimbal, because even with a one-hand gimbal, you end up using both of your hands to distribute the weight, especially if you use it over a long period of time. It is very, very exhausting to use just one hand to stabilize a gimbal, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. However, still, there are tons of different one-hand gimbals on the market. And surprisingly, this time DJI really took their time. The Ronin-S is their first one-hand gimbal, and it is here now. Let's take a look at what comes in the package. The Ronin-S comes in a nice styrofoam case that you can use for transport, just like their Phantom or Inspired drones as well. It's nice because everything has its place in there. But keep in mind that you will have to loosen all the joints in order to fit the Ronin-S in there, meaning that you will always lose your balance settings. Now let's take a quick look at how easy it is to put together the 3 main units of the Ronin-S. First of all, take the handle, which is also the battery. This is the main unit. So this controls everything in terms of the brains of the unit, the controls and the actual 3 brushless motors that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So you take the battery grip and then you lock it with this lever like this, and it's already connected. It gets the power from the grip without any cables, of course. And then you have this thing, which is like a grip extension, and you just screw it in at the bottom here. And this is also a stand, which is kind of ingenious because you can just put it down anywhere, which is another thing that is very annoying about the two-hand gimbals, most of them at least, which do not have a built-in stand. You always have to carry around the stand, and here it's built in, and it also doubles as a grip extension to hold it like this. You can have like a two-handed setup like I just talked about. I already mentioned the weight of its bigger siblings, the Ronin-2, the original Ronin, and also the Ronin-M. All of them are quite heavy to me, and unfortunately the Ronin-S is not a lightweight either. It comes in at 4.1 pounds or just under 2 kilograms, and that makes it one of the heaviest one-hand gimbals out there, probably alongside the Tilta Gravity or something like that. But most other one-hand gimbals are sometimes considerably lighter. Of course, it's a far cry from something like a Ronin-2, which is like 12 pounds or 5.5 kilograms. So that means you can only operate it for, a couple of minutes. But still, this is a heavy unit. And don't forget, that's just the gimbal. So on top of these 2 kilograms or 4.1 pounds, you still need to add a camera on there. So, it gets heavy. But to be honest, when I actually did use it on a recent shoot in Italy and Switzerland, I was surprised how long I was able to operate it. I actually was walking around with the Ronin-S all day, and when I didn't actually use it, I usually kept it switched on because the battery would last an entire day easily anyway, but I would just rest its grip extension on my hip, which basically takes off the weight from my hands, and I can, just have a little bit of the weight on my body. That makes it a little bit easier to work a full day, and it actually worked quite well. What I also discovered there, while you do get a lot of funny looks from people when you walk around crowds and through crowds with this, they don't look as weird as if you were walking with a two-handed gimbal setup, because that's what I'm usually used to. So it's actually quite nice to mingle into people with this. One reason why the Ronin-S is actually that heavy is its battery, and it's a massive battery because it can operate the whole gimbal for 12 hours. That's at least what DJI says, and after using it for a couple of weeks I can actually confirm that. But if I had the choice, I would probably have traded half of the capacity of this for a little less weight actually, because it's not like you would ever have a shooting day where you would actually operate it for 12 hours straight. But I guess actually I shouldn't be complaining, because usually gadgets have batteries that are too small. So this is a welcome, difference this time. The Ronin-S uses a long Manfrotto style base plate, which makes balancing quite easy. Now, of course, balancing always takes a bit of time and experience, but on this one it's relatively straightforward. You have very big levers that makes moving all the axes quite simple. And once you're done, you just tighten down, and then you switch on with short and long press. Here we go, and it's running. Another reason of the weight of the Ronin-S gimbal are its very big brushless motors. These motors can take a payload of up to 8 pounds or 3.6 kilograms, which is kind of massive considering how small it is. And that means you can put a C200, C300 even, or a FS5, FS7 if you really stretch it on this. One of the reasons why this also works is the angled design of this gimbal. What DJI did is they moved this motor down, which means you have a bit more leeway here if you have a longer camera. Very often it's the length and the shape of the camera that is a bigger challenge than the actual payload of a gimbal, because you cannot always reach the center of gravity with the motor right there. Most of the other gimbals have the motor right here, which means there is an absolute limit of how long the camera can be. In terms of size of the motors, bigger motors doesn't only mean that you can put bigger cameras or heavier payloads on the gimbal. It also means that they are more tolerant to any change, which means on gimbals with smaller motors, you're not supposed to fiddle around with stuff while the gimbal is actually running. On this one, you can change some things. I can take off this cable, for example, without the motor freaking out, which is something that would probably happen on some other gimbals, or stuff like that. Just like moving the monitor would of course change the balance of the whole thing. And while it is not perfectly in balance anymore, the motor is strong enough to compensate for that. But if you do any bigger changes on your setup, like changing a lens, you should definitely rebalance it. And to do that, you should switch the Ronin-S off, or just pause the motors, which you can do by pressing the on-off switch briefly twice. So now the motors are paused, I can move freely, I can put a new lens on, and when I'm done, I can, with rebalancing, I can just press the on-off switch twice again, and it's resetting. So this is quite perfect actually. You don't actually have to switch it off all the way to do that. Another thing which is great about the big motors is that they are very, very wind resistant. This means you can film out of a car, you can film out of a helicopter with this up to 75 kilometers per hour wind speed. That is good for some movement at least. DJI is also going to release a car mount and a multi-use mount for this, and that will make it even more useful. This will be an added accessory that will be on the market later this year. So the first thing we will look at in the Ronin app is a balance test. This will tell you how well you balance your gimbal. For that, you move into configuration, settings, and then more. And then there's a button called balance test, and off you go. It will move all the 3 axes, and after a few seconds, it will tell you how well you balanced your gimbal. Here we go. We have excellent results on tilt, roll, and pan, which is great. The next thing I would do is go into motor parameters and then switch on the auto tune. Now, auto tune is actually a mode which will tune the motors perfectly to your balanced setup. This is something you can do every time you start a shoot with a new setup. Now, this will make a little bit of noise. This is normal. It sounds like a coffee maker, but it will perfectly tune your setup. So this will take a few seconds, and when it's done, you can just start shooting. Now that our Ronin-S is running and properly balanced, let's take a look at the different user modes. So first of all, when you look at the interface, when you pick it up, you will see that there are 3 different modes that you can set the gimbal to. You can set these up in the app and have different behavior of the gimbal preset under these. And you can switch between those by pressing the M button. Now I set up this one to behave quite normally on mode number 1. So, it follows my movements. As you would expect from this follow mode. DJI calls this smooth track, this follow feature. The same thing that Freefly calls the majestic mode is smooth track for DJI. You can still use the joystick to move around. This is also something you can set up in the app. Now when I switch to mode 2, I have set up the motors just to demonstrate to the fastest possible mode in mode 2. So you can see it spins incredibly fast. This is the maximum speed that the motors will allow. And you can hear absolutely nothing. I mean, these motors are incredibly quiet, which is amazing. So you can use this as a remote head for pre-programmed motion control stuff as well. It's very, very quiet. And then in mode 3, I have set up something special. So you move it forward and move it up like this. And then I can make a shot that is called infinite roll. So this is a shot that's actually very, very hard to do in any different way. And you can set this up in the app. I will show you in a little bit. Just back to the joystick for a second. Let's say you walk into something and you want to pan up to see the ceiling, or you're walking around something to keep it in the center of the frame. This is where the joystick really comes in very, very handy. Now you also see a record button here. The record button works with a couple of different cameras. You need the right cable for it. This is not something that is supported by every camera yet, but it will be supported by more cameras in the future. Same is true for the focus wheel. The focus wheel right now only works with the GH5 and a couple of compatible lenses. There will be compatibility for more cameras in the future. We don't know when that will be because they are waiting for updates from Sony and Canon and the other camera manufacturers in order to be able to support this on all the cameras. Now let's take a look at the trigger button. This button has a multitude of functions. First of all, when you press it twice, it will always recenter the camera. So even if the camera is like doing this, you press it twice and it goes back to the original position. Also, if it's moved down like this, you press it twice and it goes into this position. So it always keeps level parallel to the ground. If you press the trigger button 3 times, it will turn around into a kind of selfie mode. I guess that's for people who think their phone is too small for selfies. I don't know, but it's there. And last but not least is to simply hold it down while you're pointing forward, and it will lock the pan and tilt axis. So if you want a locked off shot, or let's say you're on a skateboard or anything that's moving and you just want a dead on straight shot without any following of your movement, this is the way to go. You simply hold this down and it's done. When you hold down the M button, it's kind of the opposite of holding down the trigger button because it's the sports mode. It will follow all your movements as fast as possible. Now let's take a quick look at the different create options within the Ronin app. So in the create menu, we have a couple of different options. Let's start with capture. So capture is basically a virtual joystick We can do anything we can do with the actual physical joystick here as well. We can also change the speed in real time, slower or faster. We can move it to maximum pan speed. So, you know, all of this is here. We can change the smoothing. Panorama is a very, very cool function as well. In the Panorama, you can make a panorama of up to 360 degrees with up to, I think, 42 shots. You will define the sensor type of the camera you're using. You will define the focal length that you have on and set up right now. You will define the overlap of these images in order to create that spherical image in post-production in Lightroom, for example, and also the delay in between these movements. Of course, we can reduce the field of view of that panorama. So this rectangle down here is representing 360 degrees. If we move it down, it will adjust accordingly. Next is the time-lapse mode, and time-lapse, very straightforward. Basically, you set up the gimbal to whatever position you want it to, and then you define the interval at which time-lapse photos will be taken. You define the actual length of the final time-lapse and then the frame rate, and then it automatically calculates for you how many photos will be taken. It's also in push mode, which is a very useful mode. You can push the gimbal even though it's switched on, so it does not hurt the motors. So you can adjust this like this if you want to. You don't actually have to use the joystick for that if it's in push mode, so that's really cool. And then again, if you're done, you just press the button and it will start your time-lapse. Next is Motionlapse. Pretty much the same as time-lapse, of course, with the one big difference. You can set a beginning and an end point, and it will move in between for the time you defined. In this case, if we want a 16-second duration at 24 frames per second, at a 3-second interval, it will take 384 photos in total. And last but not least, the track function is very, very cool because this is motion control par excellence. So here I have set up 5 points. I can move between them by just tapping on them, so the camera will move to the other point. And when I'm done, I actually defined a stay time of 0 seconds, so the camera will not stop when it's actually at a keyframe. We will immediately move on. And here I can press the record button and you see how quickly it moves. It is in this very fast mode, of course. So this is very impressive. Motion control stuff used to cost a lot more money. As soon as DJI comes out with a way of mounting this to something else, people will use it for all kinds of things just because of functions like that. Let's have a quick look at the configuration within the Ronin app as well. So when you go in here, you have motor parameters. We already talked about auto tune. Smooth track is the follow mode. So you can disable smooth track for each axis, but you can also enable push pan, which is this mode. So basically you can push it while it's running. You can also change all the settings about how fast and how quickly it will react when you move the actual gimbal. Control settings, here we have the different channels. So this is exactly where I set up the mode 3, which is the infinite roll that I showed you before. So when you are in mode 3, just make sure that channel 3 is set to roll and the channel 2 is set to NA. Then you will have the flashlight mode that I showed you before. The other channels are predefined. You have channel 4, 5, and 6 for the record button, the actual user profile switch, and the recenter and selfie mode. And when you go back, you still have the settings here. You can recenter the gimbal from here as well, or you can do the balance test like I showed you before. So you might ask, what do I think about the DJI Ronin-S? As you might already be able to tell, I really like it. This is the most well thought out one-hand gimbal that I've ever come across. Maybe even though the best gimbal out there. It has so many smart functions and it's very intuitive. There is a very, very low learning curve, and still it has so many functions. You can really dive into all the details with the app. The app is super straightforward as well. The build quality is really good. And I think for this price point, for $700, it's an absolute no-brainer for professional filmmakers. If you're just starting out, this might be something that is worth considering saving up to, because it will make a huge difference in your shots. If you have never used a gimbal, just try to get your hands on this one. This is a perfect starter gimbal, and it is a perfect professional gimbal as well. I really look forward to having a dual handle setup from DJI for that. They already announced that it will be coming, so this will be really, really cool. And I think this will replace my Movi M5 on a lot of smaller shoots where I don't need a really big setup on top of my camera. So I really look forward to working with the DJI Ronin-S more, and I think, yeah, brilliant work, and I look forward to all the results I can get with this in the future. This is Cinema 5D. I am Nino Leitner. Thanks for watching and see you soon.